Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I'm here to take a look at the Domri Planeswalker deck from Magic the Gathering Ravnica Allegiance. This is for Domri City Smasher, and on the back we can see that Domri Raid is a brash young human whose small stature belies his ferocious nature and formidable power over wild beasts. Summon a horde of feral creatures and goad them into a frenzy as you stampede to victory. The contents include a deck box, a 60-card deck, which says play tabletop or online, so it does mean that you're going to be getting a code that'll let you unlock your deck on Magic Arena. You also get two 15-card booster packs, as well as a strategy insert and two reference cards. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. Here is our premium foil Domri City Smasher card. He is a 6-mana Planeswalker, 4 red and a green. Legendary Planeswalker Domri, and his abilities are +2. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. -3, Domri City Smasher deals 3 damage to any target. And -8, put 3 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Those creatures gain trample until end of turn. Here's our deck box with some sweet Domri art. He's very rebellious looking. And it's a green box. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. Here are our 2 packs of Ravnica Allegiance, just a little bit squished, but they seem to be fine. And then we have a strategy insert. Here it says, hey, before you play, this 60-card deck is ready for battle, yada yada yada, which basically just says that you should play the deck a bit before you start augmenting it all. Opening it up, we have a little description of playing the deck. It says, Domri specializes in summoning creatures to do his bidding. The bigger, the better. Cast larger and larger creatures and attack early and often to crush your opponent's defenses. Choose to give your creatures haste or extra power depending on the situation and dominate the battlefield with a relentless horde of beasts. Alright, so this is clearly a Riot deck. That's the choose to give your creatures haste or extra power. And that's the Riot ability, which says a creature with Riot gives you a choice as it enters the battlefield. You could either give the creature haste so that it can attack right away, or that creature can get a counter that will give it +1 to its power and +1 to its toughness, and you can use dice or other small items as counters. So this is a decent description of what you kind of want to do with your deck, but again, this is far short of a proper deck tech, and I would prefer that more words were given to telling you exactly how to play the deck and what all the cards are supposed to do. There's also a little bit of information about a couple of the other things that you're going to find in your cards, specifically because Riot will give your creatures haste, and trample is going to be important for your big creatures. Here's a little information about Domri City Smasher. A small, wiry human like Domri Raid might look out of place among the ogres and centaurs of the Gruul, but those who think him weak are corrected quickly and painfully. His reckless bravado led him to challenge the mighty Cyclops Borborygmos for leadership of the guild, and not even the Alpha's fearsome strength was a match for the endless waves of savage beasts Domri called into battle. So there's a little bit of story here, and I kind of appreciate that, but I kind of wish that there was a little bit more. On the back you have a little bit of information on how to play Planeswalkers, and so this is useful. And you also have an ad here and an ad here, but nothing all that interesting. I'm glad that they got rid of the ads for Magic Gathering Portal, because that didn't exist, and it replaced it with an ad for the Deck Builder's Toolkit, which, you know, is something that I guess you might be interested in if you are a beginning player. Now let's take a look at the deck. Alright, one of the rares that we get in this deck is Endray's Forerunners. It is a 7/7 for 8 mana with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it gives all your creatures +2/+2 and Vigilance and Trample until the end of turn. So that's kind of a finisher, but it costs 8, so let's hope that there's some way to ramp into these things in this deck. The other one is Glass of the Guild Pact, which gives multicolored creatures you control +1/+1, so it is a stat boost for all of your multicolored creatures. Hopefully there's a lot of those in this deck as well. And then Domri's Notorog is Domri's special rare, which searches up Domri, as is typical for these Planeswalker decks. And for 3, a red and a green, you get a 5/2 trampling creature that gets Domri either from your deck or your graveyard, which is not that bad of a deal. It's getting a 5/2 with trample that lets you draw again. The 2 on the toughness side is a bit fragile, but, you know, getting a body and getting a card, which will be Domri, which you can hopefully cast shortly soon after you play this guy, it's not a bad rare, I think. So it looks like Charging Warboar is Domri's unique uncommon, and for a generic red and a green, you get a 3/1 with haste, and it says as long as you control a Domri Planeswalker, Charging Warboar gets +1/+1 and has trample. So it seems to be mirroring the power and toughness of the Nodorog that we saw earlier. It seems like a decent creature, I guess. It has haste like many of the creatures that you get from this deck, so not bad. Ragefire appears to be Domri's common, and you get 4 of them. And it for 1 and a red sorcery, Ragefire deals 3 damage to target creature. So, it's not bad as far as removal goes. You get to do 3 damage to a creature and hopefully destroy it. And it only costs 2 mana, so that's lightning strike territory. Sure, it's not a instant and it only damages creatures, but I think that as far as removal goes, this is a decent one to put into one of these Planeswalker decks. And then we have our reference cards. We have one here that tells you the phases of the turns, as well as a URL that you can go to learn more about how to play Magic. You have how to cast spells, and then a bit about attacking and blocking here, and then information on the standard formats of Magic. On the back side, you have a code that you can use to unlock this deck in Arena. I've already used this code, so I wouldn't try to use this one as well. That is a really nice feature about these Planeswalker decks. It lets you get sort of a 2-for-1, and I very much appreciate that as well. Now, it's kind of weird to inform you about the popular Magic formats here, and I would hope that, the learn magic.wizards.com is a better source of information on what these formats are and how you play them and where you play them, because, it doesn't really give you that much information. But you can't really complain too much because there is enough information here. This covers a lot of the same information that used to be in the old reference card. Alright, so that appears to be the deck. I'm going to go ahead and play this a bit, and then I'll be back with my thoughts on it. So I played with this deck a bit, and I have some thoughts. The first thing to note is that this is an aggressive Riot-themed deck. Not everything here has Riot theme, but a lot of the cards, including Zertog Goblin, Frenzied Erynx, the Clamor Shaman, and the Bulwark Clan Crusher, and the Wrecking Beast all have the Riot mechanic on it, which says that this is an aggressive deck that wants to be attacking and trying to beat your opponent down with either speed using the haste side or with undercosted threats. Now, there are some other creatures in this deck that support this plan and others that don't quite support the plan as much, but let's first talk about what works. So the fact that a lot of the cards here are Riot themed really do help this deck with its aggressive purpose. The Zertog Goblins, especially at 3-ofs, and the Frenzied Erynx as well, are excellent choices for this deck. They are well costed, very aggressively statted, and good for attacking. Even the Gravelhide Goblin, which isn't really a Riot creature, is still something that's better than the Feral Macaw, which is a 2/2 with no abilities. And while that, I guess, can support the deck's strategy, it's not exactly the most exciting to that end. Just like the Sylvan Brush Strider and the Axebane Beast all don't really support the deck's strategy. The other thing I really like about this deck is the inclusion of 4 Ragefires, which is 4 removal spells. Excellent. And the Stony Strength actually plays alright with the Riot mechanics, specifically with the +1/+1 counter working with the Bulwark Clan Crusher's ability to throw them at your opponent or their creatures for 2 damage. So I don't begrudge the inclusion of that combat trick as well. Now, there are some more unusual choices in this deck that I don't fully comprehend. The first thing that I don't really understand is the presence of the Wrecking Beast over here and the Endraze Forerunners here at 7 and 8 mana respectively. Now, as you note, in this deck there is no ramp, and so your chance of hitting 7 or 8 mana going on time, as in turn 7 or turn 8, is very, very unlikely. You're most likely hitting this on like turn 12 and turn 15 or so. And that means that odds are these cards are going to be dead cards in your hands for the majority of the time. By the time you're even able to cast Endraze Forerunners, you either would have probably won the game or you would have lost the game without any ramp options to get up to that 8 mana. Now, it is a way to win the game should you be able to cast it, but again, there's no way to speed it out, and there's no usage of cheap creatures in this deck which the End-Raised Forerunners really works to pump. And so its inclusion is a bit of a mystery, given that it costs 8 mana. And that's kind of a bummer since it's a rare, and it doesn't really play well to the rest of the deck's themes, even though it does have those magical words Trample and Haste. Similarly, the Wrecking Beast also doesn't really play well with what this deck is trying to do, because it's just so expensive at 7 mana. Now, it does have Riot, which does match the theme of the deck, but again, at 7 mana, getting to it is going to take a while, and you're almost certainly going to give it haste when you do get to it rather than anything else, because at that point you need to try to win the game. The other things that I don't understand in this deck are the inclusion of the Burn Brights and the Glass of the Guild Pact. So, Burn Bright is best in a deck that has a lot of small creatures, can go wide, and then you can just hit your opponent out of nowhere for a lot of damage. If more of these creatures had Trample, and there are a handful of creatures here that have Trample, then I think it would get a little bit better, but generally, because a lot of these creatures tend to be a little bit bigger, the Burn Bright isn't going to be that effective, and so I don't quite understand what it's trying to do in this deck, aside from maybe sneaking in just a tiny bit of damage here and there. Domri's Notorogs do make sense to me, because at the very least, they are 5/2s, you're going to attack with them, you're likely going to trade with something your opponent has, and then get in a little bit of damage off the trample power. The Glass of the Guild Pact, it kind of makes sense given the number of multicolored creatures that are here. As you can see, there are a lot of gold creatures. The theme of the deck isn't multicolored creatures, it's Riot, and to that end, I would have expected, rather than this sort of global effect, the actual Riot enchantment that is in this set, which I think would have been better than both of the rares that are in this deck. But because there is a 7 and an 8 drop in here, normally I would begrudge the presence of 26 lands, which that's what this deck has, but because of the presence of these very expensive cards and no ramp to get to it, I guess I could understand the desire to draw more lands so that you are able to cast these 2 cards on time. That said, because of the lack of ramp leading to these, it doesn't really feel like this deck is 100% cohesive. Particularly the rares don't feel really good in this deck. Domri himself works pretty well towards this deck's end. The haste clause is not as interesting, although it does mean that you can play one of your Riot creatures with a +1/+1 counter and immediately give it haste and another +1/+1 to do more damage. But I do like that he has a -3 to protect himself. And even to that end, the Charging Warboar is not the most exciting creature, but as a haste creature, at the very least in the late game, it can appear as a surprise attacker. If you have Domri, then it does get trample and can do a little bit more damage. So I feel like this deck is a decent deck. I think it could be better with some trimming and some adjustments. If you want to play these big fat creatures more, I would probably take out the Feral Macaws and put in some sort of ramping creature or ramping artifact in order to get you more mana quickly, and then also take out some lands to balance the fact that now you're going to have actual ramp cards in the deck, and also get rid of Burn Bright and replace it with something that actually moves towards this deck's plan. I'm not very disappointed in this deck. I think it mostly does what it's trying to do. It's just that there are some inefficiencies in this deck that I don't quite understand from a teaching perspective on what you're trying to show players what to do, especially with the rares, because they're supposed to be the most exciting things in the deck, and they really work against the deck's purpose. Let me know what your experiences with this deck are in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.